I still remember that smell, the kind that comes after a summer rain in Kansas, when the dirt's soft and the grass still holds the warmth of the day. Out here, halfway across the world, in a country where even the rain smells foreign, that scent haunts me more than anything else. It reminds me that once I wasn't a soldier. I was just a kid who thought the world ended at the edge of a wheat field. Danny Morales lived one town over. We met playing high school baseball. He pitched, I caught. He had this laugh that could cut through any silence and a way of seeing the good in everything. After every game, no matter how we did, he'd pull out his harmonica and play something slow and strange. He said it was a song his father used to play when he missed home back in Mexico. It's not sad, Danny told me once. It's about carrying home inside you wherever you go. That line stuck with me, though I didn't understand it then. Summers in Kansas stretched out forever back then. We'd sit on the hood of my dad's old Ford drinking cheap soda, watching the sun drop behind the silos. Danny always talked about doing something that mattered. I never knew what that meant. I figured I'd just fix cars, maybe marry the girl who worked at the diner. Then in April of '68, the letters came. Draft notices, two identical envelopes that changed everything. My mom cried. My dad just stared at the floor. That evening, Danny came by with a photograph. The two of us in our dusty baseball uniforms, the scoreboard behind us half hidden by rain. Keep it, he said, so you remember we won once. I laughed, but my throat felt tight. The day we left, the whole town showed up to see us off. We wore crisp uniforms that didn't quite fit, boots that hadn't yet touched mud. It felt like we were going to church, not war. Danny smuggled his harmonica in his shirt pocket. When the bus pulled away, he started playing softly, the notes trembling against the hum of the engine. I looked out the window and saw my mother waving, smaller and smaller until she disappeared. I didn't know that would be the last time I ever saw her. At Fort Polk, Louisiana, the heat hit like a hammer. The days blurred together, running, shouting, crawling through mud. Sergeant Mills, our drill instructor, had a voice that could peel paint. My job, he said, is to strip you of your soul so when you get to Nam, there's nothing left for them to take. Danny whispered. Bet I could teach him harmonica if he ever shut up. We both laughed and got 50 push-ups for it. But that laugh kept us alive through the first few weeks. At night, after lights out, the cicadas would start up outside the barracks. Loud, relentless. I'd lie there sweating, listening, wondering if the bugs in Vietnam sounded the same. Danny turned to me once and said, I heard they sing all night over there. Maybe even war can't shut them up. I didn't answer. I just pictured a dark jungle on the far side of the world, the air thick with gunpowder and the hum of insects that didn't care who lived or died. The image stayed with me, like some kind of omen. Before we shipped out, we sat by the docks watching the moonlight on the water. Danny pulled out his harmonica again. The song was slower this time, almost like a goodbye. When he finished, he looked at me and said, Tom, if I don't make it back, you play this for me, yeah? I snorted. You kidding? I can't play worth a damn. He smiled. Doesn't matter. As long as you can still hear the cicadas, I'll be around somewhere. When our plane touched down in Saigon, the heat hit like we landed in the mouth of an oven. The runway shimmered, and beyond the airfield stretched miles of green. Thick, endless jungle. Somewhere in that green, smoke rose in lazy gray spirals. And then I heard it. A sound so familiar it made my chest ache. Cicadas. Loud, endless, screaming into the humid air as if the whole country was alive and on fire. Danny nudged me and grinned through the sweat. You hear that, Tom? He said. They've started singing. If there's a doorway to hell, it's got a sign that says, Welcome to Long Bin. That was the first thing I thought when we rolled off the transport truck. The air was thick enough to chew, hot enough to melt the soles off your boots. Sweat ran down your spine before you even set your pack on the ground. The jungle didn't whisper, it screamed. Every leaf buzzed, every insect hissed. Even the sky felt heavy, as if it wanted to crush us flat. They called it pre-deployment training, but it wasn't training anymore. It was survival rehearsal. The instructors were vets fresh off the line, men with 1,000-yard stares and voices that cracked like rifle shots. Sergeant McCaffrey, the meanest of them, told us on day one, forget everything you learned back in the States. Out here, you don't fight for freedom. You fight to see the goddamn sunrise. We believed him by the second week. Danny and I bunked together in a tin roof hut that baked us alive by noon and flooded by night. Every morning at 0400, we ran drills through red mud that smelled like blood and rust. We learned to crawl with our faces pressed to the earth, to shoot blind into the tree line, to throw ourselves flat when a twig snapped. There was no heroism in it, just exhaustion and repetition. Every day felt like the same bad dream. One afternoon during grenade practice, a kid from Iowa froze. His hands shook so hard he dropped the live grenade at his feet. The rest of us scattered, except Danny. Without thinking, he kicked the thing into the pit, dove over it, and the explosion sent dirt raining down over us. He came up coughing, ears ringing, laughing like a madman. Guess I got a good leg for soccer, huh? Sergeant McCaffrey called him a damn fool. But that night, when he thought no one was looking, I saw him pat Danny on the shoulder. That was Danny, fearless or stupid, maybe both. We slept in shifts. The jungle didn't sleep. Crickets, frogs, cicadas, a wall of sound that never stopped. The nights were the worst. You'd wake up drenched in sweat, listening to the mosquitoes whine by your ear, wondering if you'd ever feel cool air again. Sometimes I'd hear Danny's harmonica, soft, half a tune, fading before it found its ending. It wasn't supposed to be allowed, but no one stopped him. Maybe they needed it as much as I did. By the third week, the jokes ran dry. Guys stopped talking about home. We lost our accents, our manners, our patience. We learned to eat standing up, to shit in holes, to ignore the smell of burning trash that hung over the camp like fog. Every night we cleaned our rifles the way a priest handles a rosary. One part ritual, one part prayer. One night we were ordered to march out past the wire. Just a training patrol, they said. But the jungle was real, and the fear was realer. Every branch looked like a barrel pointed at your chest. The moon was just a pale bruise behind the clouds. I remember thinking, if I die here, nobody back home will ever know where it happened. Halfway through the march, a flare lit up the sky. Red, angry, bleeding light. "Ambush drill!" someone shouted. We hit the dirt, firing blanks into the darkness, hearts hammering like we were already dead. When the flare died, everything went black again. No sound, no orders, just the jungle breathing. Then Danny's voice whispered beside me, "You know what's crazy, Tom? Even in all this noise, the cicadas never stopped singing." I didn't say it, but I envied them, the way they screamed and still survived. At the end of the month, we were ready. That's what they told us anyway. We lined up at dawn, packs heavier than our bodies, eyes hollowed out by sleepless nights. Sergeant McCaffrey walked the line, looking at each of us like a man trying to memorize ghosts before they vanish. "Remember your training," he said quietly. "And remember, the jungle doesn't care who's right. It just eats slow." When the trucks came to take us north, Danny climbed aboard beside me, the harmonica glinting from his chest pocket. He smiled like he always did, trying to make it feel less real. "Boot camp's over," he said. "Guess it's time to meet the real thing." As the convoy pulled away, I looked back at the camp. The mud, the smoke, the place where boys learned how to die before they ever learned how to live. And somewhere in the distance, under the drone of engines, I could still hear them. Cicadas, singing like the jungle's heartbeat, steady and eternal. They told us our first patrol would be routine. I learned fast there's no such thing as routine in Vietnam. It was early morning when we moved out. A gray haze hanging over the paddies, the kind that made the world feel half asleep. Our boots sank into the mud with every step, leeches already crawling up our legs. The air tasted like metal and rot. Everything was quiet, too quiet, like the jungle was holding its breath. Danny was walking point that day. He turned back once, flashed me that same crooked grin. "The one that said, 'We got this, brother.'" I tried to grin back, but my stomach felt like a fist. The cicadas were screaming louder than ever. I remember thinking, maybe they know something we don't. We followed the dike between rice paddies, eyes sweeping the tree line. You start seeing shapes that aren't there, faces in the foliage, movement where there's only wind. The lieutenant, barely 22, whispered, "Stay sharp." His voice cracked. None of us said anything. We were all too busy listening, to the bugs, to the wind, to our own hearts beating like trip flares in our chests. Then it happened. A single pop, small, almost harmless, like someone snapping a stick. But every nerve in my body screamed. Then came the real sound, the ripping roar of an AK-47. The air itself seemed to explode. Bullets tore through the palms, through water, through flesh. Someone screamed. Someone fell. The world went red and brown all at once. I hit the mud, face first, rifle clutched to my chest. My helmet filled with water. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. I was sure I was dead until a hand grabbed my collar and yanked me behind a dike. Danny. His face was streaked with mud and blood, eyes wild. "Breathe, Tom," he shouted. "Breathe, goddammit." So I did. Somehow I did. We returned fire. Blind, desperate, at shadows in the tree line. The M16 kicked against my shoulder like it hated me. I saw nothing, just flashes and smoke, and the wet slap of bullets hitting water. The lieutenant was screaming for air support, the radio static louder than the gunfire. A few minutes, maybe seconds. Later, it stopped. Just stopped. The jungle fell silent again, as if nothing had happened. No birds, no voices, just the hiss of steam rising from the wet ground. We crawled out, counting heads. 2 were missing. One of them we found face down in the mud. The other, we never did. The lieutenant said we had to keep moving. "We'll mark it and come back," he said. But we all knew we wouldn't. The jungle takes what it wants. Danny sat beside me, panting, his hands shaking. "That was it," he said quietly. "Our first one." "Yeah," I whispered. "Our first." He looked at me. Really looked. And I could see something gone in his eyes. The grin, the boyish spark. It had slipped away somewhere between that first pop and the silence after. We marched back to camp that night under a bleeding sunset. No one spoke. The radio played soft static. The air smelled like burnt gunpowder and wet rice. I remember staring at my hands. They were trembling, but not from fear anymore. It was something deeper, something colder. When we reached the perimeter, Danny lit a cigarette with dirty fingers and passed it to me. "Guess we're soldiers now," he said. The smoke burned my throat, but I took another drag anyway. Somewhere in the dark, the cicadas started up again. Loud, endless, merciless. And that's when I realized the jungle never really goes quiet. It just waits for you to notice the silence inside yourself. They never tell you that war isn't mostly fighting. It's waiting. Endless, mind-numbing, soul-crushing waiting. After our first firefight, they pulled us back to the fire base near Chu Lai. We patched our wounds, cleaned our rifles, and pretended we were fine. The brass called it a tactical pause. To us, it felt like purgatory. Days bled into each other like sweat into a uniform. The jungle hummed and hissed, always alive, always watching. The air was thick with the smell of diesel, sweat, and gun oil. Every night, the sky glowed orange from distant artillery, like the horizon itself was burning. We built sandbag walls, dug new foxholes, burned trash, filled canteens, over and over again. Routine became religion, anything to stop thinking, because when you stopped, the noise came back. Danny started talking less. He'd just sit by the sandbags at sunset, helmet off, cigarette hanging from his lip, staring into the tree line. Sometimes I'd sit with him. We didn't need to speak. The silence between us said enough. One night, he finally broke it. "You ever think about home?" he asked, eyes still fixed ahead. "All the time," and I said. He nodded. "Funny thing, I can't remember my mom's voice anymore. I remember the smell of her cooking, the way she'd hum when she washed dishes. But her voice? It's gone." I didn't know what to say, so I just passed him my canteen. He took a sip, winced, and laughed softly. "Warm water," he said. "Best vintage in Nam." We laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laughter that makes you feel better. It just kept you from falling apart. Every morning, the mail chopper came in. That was the only thing we looked forward to. Some guys got letters thick with perfume. Others got nothing at all. The ones who didn't get mail stopped coming to the landing pad after a while. It was easier that way. I got a letter from my little sister once. Crayon drawings, smiley suns, blue skies. I folded it and kept it in my helmet band. It felt like a shield, even if it was just paper. Then there were the rumors, always rumors. A major push coming soon. A ceasefire by Christmas. Replacements arriving. Replacements dying. You stop believing any of it after a while. You just exist. One meal, one patrol, one heartbeat at a time. At night, the jungle would come alive. Frogs, crickets, distant gunfire. Whispers in the dark. You'd lie there in your foxhole, staring at the stars through the mosquito net, and wonder if the same stars hung over your home. You start to think maybe the war's not even real. Maybe you've been dreaming it all, and one day you'll wake up back in your bed in Iowa, the sound of cicadas replaced by your dad's old radio and the smell of pancakes in the kitchen. Then you roll over, feel the mud, the sweat, the rifle pressed against your chest, and remember, no, this is real, and tomorrow will be the same. A few days later, the lieutenant gathered us around the map table. He looked tired, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. Intel says there's a VC unit moving near the valley, he said. We're going to intercept. Night patrol. No one said a word. We just nodded, loaded our gear, and checked our rifles. Danny glanced at me as he pulled his flak jacket on. Guess boredom's over, he said with that dry half grin. And I swear, for a second, I almost wished it wasn't. The night we went into the valley, the moon was just a sliver, thin and mean like a knife. Perfect night for ghosts. That's what the locals called it. Thung Lung Ma, the Valley of Ghosts. We moved out just after sunset, 12 of us, single file along a narrow path that cut through the rice paddies. No talking, no smoking. Even the radio guy kept his chatter down. The only sounds were boots in the mud and the faint buzz of insects. That never-ending chorus of life that made you forget there was death hiding behind every leaf. The air was so thick you could taste it. Wet earth, smoke, something metallic underneath. Every time I swallowed, it felt like the jungle swallowed back. Danny walked ahead of me. I could see the back of his helmet glint faintly under the moonlight. He'd tied that same lucky red bandana around his wrist. Said his girl sent it to him before he shipped out. Keep me safe, she wrote. I didn't believe in luck anymore, but maybe he still did. We moved through the mist, eyes darting everywhere, rifles ready. Every shadow looked like a man. Every sound felt like a warning. When you walk point in Vietnam, you stop being human. You become a nerve, raw, twitching, ready to snap. Halfway through the valley, the lieutenant raised his hand. We froze. The world went still. There it was again. A rustle, soft but wrong. Not wind, not animal, something else. He motioned to flank left. Danny nodded and slipped ahead into the tall grass, crouched low. I followed a few feet behind, heart pounding so loud I was sure it'd give us away. Then came the whisper, sharp and cold. Tripwire! My breath caught. I saw it. Faint glimmer of metal, strung low between two bamboo stakes. One wrong step, and we'd be vapor. Danny froze inches away from it, eyes wide. I reached out slowly, touched his shoulder. He didn't move. We backed away, one step then another, and that's when the jungle screamed. A flare shot up from somewhere ahead, turning night into blood-red daylight. Then came the gunfire, sudden, deafening from all sides. AKs, close, very close. We hit the mud, returning fire into the trees. I couldn't see a damn thing. Just flashes and shadows and the sharp staccato of death echoing in my ears. Someone shouted for the medic. Someone else screamed. The radio crackled, then went silent. The lieutenant was yelling, but his words drowned under the chaos. I just kept firing, fingers numb, until the rifle clicked empty. When it finally stopped, all that was left was the smell. Gunpowder, blood, and rain. The flare's smoke hung low, glowing like ghost light through the mist. I looked around. Half our squad was gone. Just gone. The jungle had swallowed them whole. Danny was lying a few yards away, motionless, face down in the mud. I crawled to him, my hands shaking so bad I could barely grip his shoulder. Danny, I whispered. Hey, man. He stirred, groaned. Alive. Relief hit me so hard it almost hurt. Jesus, I muttered. You scared me, brother. He coughed, eyes blinking open. Did we get him? Yeah, I said, though I had no damn idea. We sat there in the rain, the jungle steaming around us, waiting for medevac that never came. By dawn, the valley was quiet again. Too quiet, like it was ashamed of what it had done. When the sun rose, the mist burned away, and the cicadas started up again, loud and relentless, like nothing had happened. That's the thing about this place. It doesn't care. You fight, you bleed, you scream, and the jungle just keeps breathing. Danny tied his red bandana tighter around his wrist. Still lucky, he said, forcing a smile. I nodded, but deep down, I knew better. Luck had left us somewhere in that valley. and it wasn't coming back. They say you only carry what you need. In Vietnam, that's a lie. We carried everything. Rifles, ammo, rations, mosquito nets, bandages, ponchos, letters from home. But after a while, you start carrying things that don't fit in a pack. The weight shifts from your shoulders to your chest, and it never goes away. After the valley, we were down 4 men. Their names were still on the roster, like ghosts refusing to be erased. The lieutenant said replacements would come soon, but the jungle didn't wait for replacements. It just kept whispering, reminding us what we'd lost. Danny changed after that night. We all did, but with him, it showed. He stopped sleeping, sat up most nights cleaning his rifle, even when it was already clean. His red bandana, once bright as fresh paint, had turned brown from sweat and blood. He still cracked jokes sometimes, but the laughs never reached his eyes. One morning I found him staring at something in his hand. A small photo, folded 100 times over. A girl with freckles and a summer dress. He didn't notice me at first. "You think she's still waiting?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," I said, even though I wasn't sure if I believed it. He smiled, barely. "Guess that's one of the things we carry, huh?" That night, I couldn't sleep either. The rain was coming down hard, pounding the tin roof of our hooch like artillery. I lay there thinking about home, about my old man working nights at the mill, about my sister drawing suns that never set. And I realized I couldn't picture their faces anymore. The details were slipping away, replaced by new faces, the ones I'd seen in the mud, the ones I couldn't save. That's when it hit me. The real war wasn't out there in the jungle. It was in here, under the helmet, behind the eyes. Every sound, every smell, every scream, it stayed. You could scrub your hands raw and still feel it clinging. A week later, we got orders to move north. Strategic redeployment, they called it. We packed our gear in silence. No one talked about the valley. No one had to. We carried it with us. As we marched, the jungle seemed different. Darker, heavier. Every tree looked familiar, like it had seen us before. The cicadas screamed above us, endless and merciless, like a memory we couldn't turn off. When we stopped to rest, I took out my sister's letter, the one with the crayon suns. The paper was soft now, edges worn thin. I traced the lines with my thumb and thought about what it meant to still have something untouched, something innocent. Then I looked over at Danny. He was watching the tree line again, fingers tapping his rifle like a heartbeat. I wanted to tell him it was okay, that we'd make it, that someday we'd forget all this. But I didn't, because deep down, I knew forgetting wasn't part of the deal. We carried rifles and rations, sure, but we also carried fear, the quiet kind that never shows up in the photos. We carried guilt, too, for surviving, for not crying, for becoming the kind of men who could watch someone die and still finish their coffee. We carried the weight of promises we'd never keep. We carried each other, when nothing else could. And above it all, we carried the sound of the cicadas, that endless, shrill reminder that life goes on, even when it shouldn't. We followed the river north for 2 days. It wound through the jungle like a scar, wide, brown, slow-moving, carrying everything the war didn't want to keep. Bodies, ash, silence. The smell hit first, sweet and rotten, like wet wood mixed with gasoline. Then came the smoke, thin gray ribbons curling above the trees, drifting low, hugging the earth. The lieutenant said it was probably locals burning fields, but we all knew better. We reached the village just after dawn, or what was left of it. The huts were black skeletons. The rice paddies were scorched to mud. A few chickens wandered between the ashes, pecking at nothing. The only sound was the river lapping against the bank. Slow, steady, uncaring. Danny stepped forward, boots crunching on burnt bamboo. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. Nobody replied. We spread out, checking for survivors. There weren't any. Just the outlines, small, perfect, burned into the walls where people used to be. Children, families, gone in seconds. I found a half-melted toy in the dirt, a wooden soldier with one arm missing. I turned it over in my hand, and something in me cracked, quiet and deep. I wanted to believe this was the enemy's doing, but the shell casings on the ground said otherwise. Our kind of brass. American. The lieutenant said nothing. He just stood there staring at the river. Then he said the words that still echo in my head. "Mark it. Move on. Move on. That's what you do here. You move on because if you stop, you start to feel, and feeling gets you killed. But that night, as we camped near the river, no one slept. The smoke still hung in the air, clinging to our clothes, our skin, our souls. Danny sat beside the fire, staring into it like he was trying to burn the memory out of his own eyes. He finally said, "You think we did that, Tom?" I didn't answer, because the truth was sitting between us, breathing. We didn't need to say it. He shook his head. They told us we're here to protect people. But what if this is what protection looks like? His voice broke on the last word. I didn't know how to tell him that maybe the jungle didn't care who started the fire. It just kept growing. Sometime past midnight, I walked down to the river. The water glowed faintly from the moonlight, smoke still curling across it like ghosts drifting home. I knelt and touched the surface. It was warm. That's when I realized the war wasn't just outside anymore. It had soaked into everything, the ground, the air, us. When I looked up, Danny was behind me, cigarette glowing like a star in the dark. He took a drag, exhaled slow, then said, "You ever wonder if maybe we're the bad guys?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him it was all for something. Freedom, duty, whatever word made it sound clean. But the river behind him kept moving, carrying ashes downstream, and I couldn't lie anymore. By morning, the smoke had cleared. The sun came up golden and bright, as if the world had forgotten everything. The lieutenant gave the order to move out. We shouldered our packs and walked on. Through the mud, through the silence, through the weight we could never drop. And as the cicadas started up again, shrill, endless, indifferent, I knew the war had changed us for good. Not with bullets, but with the things we'd seen and couldn't wash off. The rain had stopped that morning. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't smell like death. Just wet earth and smoke, the natural kind. It felt almost peaceful. That's when I decided to write home. I'd been carrying a folded piece of stationery for months. Lined paper, soft and sweat-stained. My sister's last letter was still tucked in my helmet band, the one with the yellow suns and stick figures. I figured it was time to send something back. But when I sat down with a pen, I realized I didn't know where to start. What do you tell a kid who still believes the world makes sense? That you're fine? That you're safe? That you haven't turned into something you don't recognize? The camp was quiet except for the hum of generators and the far-off buzz of cicadas. Danny was napping beside a sandbag wall, his rifle across his chest. The lieutenant was somewhere on the radio, talking about supplies, reinforcements, coordinates, words that had lost all meaning. I started writing anyway. "Hey kiddo, how's school? You still drawing those crazy suns? I bet you are. It's hot here, but we're okay. The guys are good. We keep busy. I'll be home before you know it." I stopped there. The lies felt heavy, sitting on the page like wet stones. I looked around at the camp, the mud, the smell, the hollow faces, and thought about the burned village by the river, about the men we left behind, about the sound of a child's toy breaking in my hand. I tore the paper out and started again. "Hey kiddo, sometimes it rains so hard here the world disappears. You can't see your hand in front of your face. You just sit and wait for it to pass. I guess that's kind of what life is like right now. A storm we're all trying to wait out." I paused, stared at the words, and felt something twist inside me. It wasn't enough. It wasn't true. So I kept writing. There are things I wish I could tell you, but I don't know how. Things that don't fit into words. Maybe when I get back I'll try. But for now, just keep drawing. Keep those suns shining. Somebody's got to remember what the light looks like. When I finished, my hands were shaking. The ink had bled in places from the humidity. I folded it carefully and slipped it into my breast pocket. I didn't know if I'd ever send it. Maybe some things weren't meant to leave this place. That night, Danny woke up screaming, a short, sharp sound, then silence. He sat there, drenched in sweat, eyes wide open, breathing like he'd just run a mile. "You okay?" I whispered. He nodded too fast. "Yeah, just a dream." But it wasn't. We both knew what he'd seen. The valley, the river, the fire. Things that follow you long after you wake up. I handed him my canteen. "Here," I said. He drank, wiped his mouth, and gave me a half smile. "You ever gonna send that letter?" "Maybe," I said. "Maybe not." He nodded. "Yeah, sometimes it's better if they don't know." The next morning, the mail chopper came. I held the letter in my hand for a long time, staring at it. that little piece of home in a place that had none. Then I slipped it back into my pocket and walked away. Because how do you tell the truth about something that doesn't end when the shooting stops? The lieutenant called for a briefing. Another mission, another valley. Danny was already checking his gear, bandana tight around his wrist. The sound of cicadas rose in the distance. Sharp, endless, familiar. And I thought about that line I'd written. A storm we're all trying to wait out. But deep down, I knew. Some storms don't pass. They just move with you. They said we were going home. The words didn't sound real. After months of dust, smoke, and death, home felt like something people said to keep you moving. Like one more patrol, or just a few more days. The last week in country was the longest of my life. They called it short-timer's anxiety. You start thinking about everything that could still kill you before you make it to the plane. A stray round, a bad step, a mortar that doesn't care your ticket home is already printed. We were stationed near Da Nang then, waiting for transport. The base was half mud, half memory. Guys burned letters, traded cigarettes, or just sat and stared at nothing. Danny kept carving lines into his helmet with a knife, one for each month he survived. 22 lines. He stopped after that. The night before we left, the rain came back. It hit the tin roofs like machine gun fire. I lay awake listening to it, counting the seconds between thunder and flash, wondering if I'd forgotten how to sleep in silence. The next morning, the trucks came. We loaded our gear without a word. Nobody joked. Nobody cheered. It was strange. You'd think going home would feel like winning, but it didn't. It felt like leaving ghosts behind. The airstrip was a blur of khaki and noise. Engines roaring, propellers spinning, men hugging and pretending not to. I saw the body bags lined up near the hangar, ready for transport too. Different flight, same destination. Danny was beside me, quiet as ever. He had that look again, the faraway one, like he was already somewhere else. When the sergeant called our names, he slapped me on the shoulder. "See you on the other side, brother." I nodded. "Yeah, other side." He walked toward the second transport. I never saw him board. Later, I learned his plane went down over the South China Sea. Mechanical failure, they said, like it was just another broken thing. Our own plane lifted off into gray skies. No one spoke. Some prayed under their breath. Others stared at their boots. As we climbed higher, the jungle stretched out below. Endless green swallowing everything we'd done, everyone we'd been. I watched it disappear inch by inch until there was nothing but clouds. For a second, I thought I could hear the cicadas again, faint, buried under the drone of the engines. Then they were gone too. When we landed in San Francisco, the light was all wrong. Too bright, too clean. The air smelled of gasoline and flowers, both foreign to me now. There were no parades, no music, just reporters and protest signs. Someone shouted "baby killer" from behind a fence. I didn't even flinch. I just kept walking, duffel bag in hand, eyes straight ahead. A young woman offered me a paper flower. I didn't know whether to take it. It looked too delicate, like something that didn't belong in my hands anymore. At customs, an officer asked if I had anything to declare. I almost laughed. What could I say? Yeah, I'm bringing back a ghost. 2, maybe 3, and a sound I'll never stop hearing. The bus ride home was the quietest part. Fields rolled past, gold, wide, endless. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. Houses, roads, even the sky. When we reached my town, my mother was waiting at the station. She ran to me, tears in her eyes, arms open. I let her hug me. I even smiled. But inside, it felt like watching someone else's movie. She asked about Danny. I told her he made it home too. It wasn't true, but it was kinder that way. That night, I slept in my old room. The posters, the baseball glove, the faint smell of soap. Everything was the same, except me. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it hum, and for a moment I thought it was the sound of cicadas again. Soft, steady, endless. Like the war had followed me home. 40 years. That's how long it took me to come back. Not to Vietnam. I never made that trip. But to the part of myself that stayed there. They built the wall in D.C. while I was trying to pretend I was fine. Got married, had 2 kids, sold insurance, mowed the lawn every Saturday. The whole American script. But some nights I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, ears filled with that same humming sound. Cicadas, rifles, rotor blades. I couldn't tell anymore. I'd go sit on the porch with a beer, watching the dawn crawl over the trees. My wife used to ask what I was listening for. I never had an answer. When I finally went to the memorial, it was fall. The air had that sharp edge to it, clean, cold, honest. The black granite stretched out like a wound that refused to close. People moved quietly, tracing names with trembling fingers. Families, veterans, kids too young to understand. I walked along the wall, scanning lines and letters, not sure what I wanted to find. Then I saw it. Daniel J. Rourke. 22 lines carved on a helmet, now carved into stone. My throat locked up. I reached out, touched his name. The granite was colder than I expected. Smooth, solid, unyielding. And just like that, the years collapsed. The smell of jungle rain, the weight of my pack, Danny's laugh, the sound of the chopper lifting, it all came rushing back, alive and raw. I didn't cry, I just stood there, hand on his name, listening. And I swear I could hear them again. Not ghosts, not voices, just cicadas. Soft, steady, eternal. The sound of a summer that never really ended. A young man beside me asked, "Sir, were you there?" I nodded. He looked at me the way I once looked at old soldiers, with curiosity and something like fear. He said, "My granddad was too. He never talked about it." I smiled faintly. Most of us didn't. He hesitated, then asked, "Was it bad?" I thought about that for a long time. Finally, I said, "It was loud." He frowned, not sure what I meant, but I did, because even now I still hear it. When I left the wall, I stopped at a park bench nearby. The trees were full of cicadas that year, loud, relentless. People complained about the noise, but to me, it sounded like home. I closed my eyes, let the sound wash over me. And for the first time in decades, I didn't try to silence it. Because maybe the cicadas aren't a reminder of war after all. Maybe they're just the world whispering that life goes on, that even after the fire and the loss and the silence, something still sings. End of The Sound of Cicadas. For all who came home and those who never could.